Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Vanessa Dunn, Guyton, and I am the proud founder and executive director of Hush No More. Hush No More supports survivors when they're ready to come forward to share their story, to get resources, or just to have somebody to talk to. We also provide training in our communities, what we call the hush topics: sexual assault, domestic violence, child sexual abuse, incest, all of those topics that families and friends and organizations and communities have a hard time discussing. So we talk about those topics here. And so either I'll have a survivor, an advocate, or a nonprofit organization in the studio with me. So tonight we're going to talk about, can you really forget your trauma, right? Can you forget sexual trauma? A lot of people question me and say, how can someone forget being sexually assaulted? It is real. And we're going to talk tonight about it. And we were doing some research, and statistically, 32% of individuals can forget their trauma, and then 42% can forget sexual trauma. So this is a common occurrence. And that's why I really wanted to talk about it, because it's happening. And if you see it on the news, you might think that it's not real and that it can't happen. So we're going to talk about it today. So thank you for joining me. And I'm going to bring on my amazing guest. Hello, Maria. I have Maria Socolof with me. And I am so honored that you decided to join me. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for having me so much.
I wanted us to have this discussion because when we were talking, we have similar backgrounds and experiences, but different. And so I wanted you to be able to come on and share your story so people can really get an idea of how real it is for individuals to forget what happened to them, maybe in childhood, as an adult, and that it's very common, and so that people can understand what's been going on with them as well. And so, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? What was it like for Maria?
Yeah, interestingly, it was very nice. In fact, a lot of people in the same situation with a repressed memory might not say that, but I didn't know anything different than this happy childhood that I did have, and I have two parents that loved me, two parents who are still married to this day, 64 years later. And I had two older brothers, and everything was great. I was a gymnast. I loved doing gymnastics. I competed all the way through college, went to graduate school. So, everything worked out really nicely for me as far as I knew. And yeah, it was a really charmed life I felt I had, and I did have, in fact. And so um, it wasn't until I was 42 years old that I remembered what had happened when I was most likely 10. So, so even and I did well in school. I checked off all the boxes of what a good kid does, and I came to find out later that typical of some sexual abuse survivors. We all react in our own ways, and have our own paths. But sometimes we become the perfectionist or the good do gooder. um, and that was me. And I always, got along with everybody, pleased everybody, and that's my personality. And I don't know how much is driven from what happened, or that's just innately was in me, and maybe became a little stronger because of what had happened. But yeah, so I had no complaints. I got along with my parents, my brothers, everything seemed great. Um, so that's, I guess, my childhood, if you want
Your
to
childhood. Yeah. So I
categorize
go to
that.
your website and I did see video of you being a gymnast.
Uh-huh.
You
Yeah.
were really good, like
Yes.
really, really good.
Well, it's funny. I was almost hesitant to put when I found that video recently, and I was like, oh, I was looking at all my mistakes. I was like, oh, my toe wasn't pointed there, and this. I was like, oh, this is terrible. I'm thinking to myself, and a friend looked at it and said, no, that's really good. And when I did look at it with another set of eyes, I said, that was pretty good, because I'm thinking of Olympics, and I always knew I was never that good. So I just had put myself in a lower place, thinking, well, I was only at this level. I was only Division 3 in college, so I wasn't that good. But yeah, I even watched it again and thought, you know what, I could do a lot of stuff that I can't do now. So
Yeah, I could barely do a cartwheel. I was impressed, and I know that you really did pour a lot of yourself into gymnastics, and we do that. We pour
yeah,
ourselves into things to take our mind off of what's
right,
really going on. And so
right.
fast forward, you're 42. What happened
Mhm.
to you at 42?
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of gymnastics, I was still I graduated, and generally there's not any way to do gymnastics unless you're at the Olympic level, beyond college. But I really missed it because it was really part of my life, and it essentially I think it held me together, and it was something that the being tight and controlled in that sport, I think was very important for my subconscious
Mhm.
to know that I was safe and I could take control of myself and take care of myself and be strong. So I think that was a lot of it was all related. But jump to when I was 40, I was still doing gymnastics. I had a full-time job as an environmental scientist, and but I couldn't give up the gymnastics, so I found places to teach in the evenings and on the weekends, and they let me work out a little bit. So I was still at the age of 40, still doing flips and things. Not quite up to speed of what I was doing in my competitive years, but I was still doing that. So I was in shape. I was, and by then I had two kids. They were 4 and 10 at that point, and I rolled over in my sleep and heard a pop in my neck, and it turns out I ruptured a disc in my neck just by rolling over in bed, and which was crazy. I never even had a real injury in all the years, the 10 years of competitive gymnastics. I was the only one on our team who didn't go to the trainer before practice every day and get taped up and fixed up. So it was just seemed so odd, but all of a sudden I was in excruciating pain, and I had ruptured the disc. Within a month I had surgery, neck surgery, because I was losing function of my arm. So I had the surgery, and then I still wasn't getting better, or I was having pain sort of on the other side of my neck, but still not as bad as the sharp nerve pain down my arm, but it was just debilitating. And this went on for years. I did everything the doctor said, and nothing was getting better. So um, finally, after 2 years, I was, excuse me, a friend of mine, excuse me, a friend of mine told me about this myofascial release therapy. And so I tried this, and that's when I started to get better. My neck pain started to come down, and it turned out because what started to come out was that there were a lot of emotions held up in the tension in my body that was perpetuating this pain. Now, none of the doctors really realized that, and it was reading about the mind body connection and reading a lot of things that I started to learn this. And then this method of myofascial release really works. It's like massage, but they kind of put light pressure on your muscles and the fascia, which surrounds the muscles, and just help it kind of get more fluid and more takes out restrictions when our bodies are stressed and there's trauma, whether it's even from the surgery. Say this a scar is, the tissue gets all kind of bunched up together, kind of like saran wrap is stuck to itself. So they help you release that. But as they were doing that, I was getting emotional and having thoughts about fears that I had, like the surgery, how afraid I was of surgery, and how sad I was of 2 years of pain, of being in pain and missing all this stuff, doing stuff with my kids. And one thing after another, I went to this 2-week intensive of this therapy after 4 months of doing it locally with a therapist. But so I was in this intensive and doing 3 sessions a day, and day after day, kind of your body starts to get out of the patterns it's sort of stuck in.
Mhm.
So it was the last day of the 2 weeks, and it was an outpatient clinic. So I was staying somewhere else. But when I woke up the morning of the last day, well, let me jump back. The previous day, the second to last day, I had a memory of being stuck in an undertow when I was, I think, 5 years old. And I remember that. I remember having my hair in my front of my face and spinning in the wave and thinking I couldn't breathe. I remember thinking I couldn't breathe. So that started to make me think, wow, that makes sense now. Maybe why I was so scared of the surgery, and I was panicked in the hospital after the surgery when my throat was so swollen. I'd start to fall asleep and my breathing would get cut off, and I was in a panic. And I'm calling for the nurses, calling the nurse button, and I could hear them walk by my room, and they didn't come. And I was freaking out, and I can't breathe. I'm going to die. So now it started to make sense. Wow, maybe I had some of that trauma from that incident at the beach. So that was the second to last day, and I thought, wow, as I was having these um, remembrances, my pain was starting to come down. So it was like I was releasing a lot of the the fears and the other emotions that I had sort of stuck in my body for all this time. Um, so then, I guess back to the last morning, I woke up to a dream that I had, and that's when I remembered. My dream was not exactly what had happened as a child, but I was actually an adult, and the other people in the dream were adults too. But what occurred in the dream sparked my memory of what happened to me when I was 10. When I remember being 10, and it was the clearest memory I've ever had in my life. It was the strangest thing because for 40 now I was 42 at this point. For 42 years, I had no idea, but when I remembered, it was so clear, and I felt like I had known every day of my life, but I knew I didn't. Consciously, I did not know. So it was such a bizarre thing. I'm thinking, am I crazy? All right, I know I'm not crazy. I've lived this life. I've, made it through graduate school. I did all these things. I can't be crazy, but how could this be? So start questioning yourself and really wondering how could it be? But at this deep visceral level that it's true because you just know. Where would that come from? It wasn't like a dream, like a strange dream. I've had strange dreams before, but this was just a true knowing, and it was, again, so clear. I felt like it had been boxed up in a little package, stuck somewhere in my brain, and my brain held on to it till I was ready to handle it, is the best I can explain it. Because at the time, so what happened, it was my brother molested me, and I was, this so, um, get into the story a little, but my, what we found later is a letter that I had written to my parents that they found in the attic. They just happened to, this was about a year after I remembered. They happened to be cleaning out their attic, and they found some letters I had written to them, notes that I had typed. And one I typed to my mother, just a horrible note saying how much I hated her and how horrible she was. And this was so shocking to me as a 42-year-old because I love my mother, and she's a great mother. I mean, she's the best you can imagine. And I couldn't imagine why I would have written this. And in the corner of the note, my dad had actually written a little note for the date and why I was so mad. And obviously, they must have saved this because it was probably out of character. I'm sure. I know it was out of character for me because I was a sweet thing. Um, but he wrote that. What did he say? When when mother wouldn't sleep with daughter, and he wrote September 2nd, 1975. Um, so just putting it together, because I also think, for what it's worth, I mean, I also know that I ruptured the disc in my neck on September 1st, 2005, and I honestly believe, because it was a one-time event for me, with my brother. So I really think it was the September 2nd date that he had on that note. I think it was the day after it happened, and I truly believe sometimes our minds know anniversaries. And I ruptured that disc 30 days, potentially to the day. 30, sorry, 30 years
30
to the
years.
day.
Yeah.
30 years to the day. That's based on that evidence. I don't remember writing that letter. I don't know exactly when it was, but that just made sense to me once I started to try to put this picture together because so much of it didn't make sense to me. And I started having these, different clues that started to make more sense to me that, this all was going on, and I was subconsciously holding it in, um, my body until I was ready to handle it. And then I think when my mother rejected me, I took that as a rejection. Again, this is me speculating. I don't remember this specifically thinking this way, but I figure I must have, taken that and decided. That's when my brain said, okay, we're putting this away. You did not get a reaction. You didn't get any help. You reached out. I feel like that was my way of saying, I need help, my cry for help, without saying it. If I was 10, maybe I didn't have the words. Maybe I didn't know what to say or what to do. But then, so I've even seen in the research that one of the called risk factors for repressing a memory is if the mother specifically, but if anybody doesn't believe them, but even more so if the mother doesn't believe the victim, that it's often another reason why you might tend to repress your memory instead. There's other reasons too, but yeah.
Part of your getting all of this together, your story together, getting all the memories together, did you talk to your brother or did you talk to your parents and tell them what had happened and what you did remember?
Yeah, so I remembered it that last day of that intensive, and when I got home the next day, my parents were actually at my house helping watch the kids with my husband. So yeah, I knew I had to tell them. I just this was, I'm 42. I wasn't afraid of telling them. I just wanted to tell them because this was so huge, and such a explanation of why I was in pain, so much physical pain. Because also, for what it's worth, when I after that last day, my pain dropped significantly and then stayed down until I was rear-ended in a car later, but spiked it up. But it really, I knew there was that connection, was that trauma and all the other traumas, physical and emotional, that may have had all along through my life, added up. But that one was the major one that was contributing to my pain. So when I told my mom, I had actually written in a journal that night, when I was still at the clinic. So I just gave her the thing I had written. Um, so yeah, so she, I mean, like I said, she's amazing. We cried together, and she just hugged me and said, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was pretty beautiful. But, and I just felt bad because I know she's in the middle now. It's her two of her kids.
Two of us.
It's not, she can't get mad at the perpetrator, and say, oh, we're gonna go get him. And at this point, it was so much after the fact. But yeah, so it's a tricky thing, in families like that. So but yeah, she was great. And then I told my husband, he was great. And then my brother, I emailed a few days later,
You
and
emailed your
I
brother.
emailed him, and I said, "Do you remember this?" And he wrote back and said, "Yes." And he said, "I cannot deny I am responsible for all that you have suffered." So that was like the biggest gift I could have ever gotten from him, honestly, because it was, not only was I relieved that he corroborated my memory, so I knew I wasn't crazy, even though I knew I wasn't, but I confirmed that I wasn't crazy. Just to have him say that yes, he did it, and you know he's responsible, was just something I need. A lot of people don't get it, so I was lucky.
People don't.
Yeah, I was so I just felt I really felt so lucky that I did get that, and that it just helped. It was another step, and it took another 13 years. Last year was the first time we actually spoke face to face about it. So there was been a lot of healing going on in between that time, and he and I continued to communicate on email for a while. Or anytime I was just overcome with trying to figure this out and process it, I would email him because I didn't know what else to do. I was, you know, it was bad. I was physical pain and emotional. Like I finally found a point where my emotional pain, I understood that emotional pain can be worse than the physical pain. And I was in debilitating physical pain, but that emotional pain was just overwhelming. But yeah, so he kind of helped. Like so it helped. And then I did find out that he had been abused outside of the home. It took about 9 months for him to tell me that, but so that was really huge for me too, to understand more why it happened. Because I remember being in therapy and being like, why? You hear this child voice come out of you almost, and I was just saying, why did he do it? And that helped me process. So being in touch with him again, I'm so lucky because so many people don't get this, that I got him to communicate with me about it, and it wasn't easy for him. It wasn't easy for anyone, but yeah, so that was
That's
lucky.
your mother, I applaud her. And I'm glad that you're sharing this story because sometimes people are scared to go to their family and actually share. And you did it. And the way you did it is a creative way by writing it down, sending
Mhm.
emails that worked for you.
Right,
So it doesn't have to be a face to face,
right,
right? And so I like that
yeah,
you're sharing the way you did it and that worked for you.
right.
And that your brother is probably on this healing journey with you. Is he
Yeah,
trying to kind of figure his life out as well?
yeah, and he's doing it a little differently. Like, he's not going to the therapy that I did, like, as much therapy, or any for that matter, but many times he has said to me as we were communicating that this is helping him. So, something he hadn't faced at all for his own trauma and everything. So that, I feel like he had it on both sides. He was traumatized by victimized by somebody else, but then I know there was guilt and shame and everything else for what he did to me. So, um, but yeah, so he has said that this process was helping him just by me talking to him. And because I'm kind to him. I don't, I didn't want anything bad to happen to him. He's my brother. He's still, no matter what. And that's the memory I always had, the conscious memory I always had. So I never wanted anything bad to happen to him, and especially when I found out what had happened to him, I felt like I knew there was not malicious intent. Now, a lot of survivors and victims, it's very different, where there was, a long-term situation where it's happening over and over, and there really wasn't, it can be very different. But I felt in my situation, it was easier for me to be able to communicate with him and just, give him the grace too, to say, I know you, he was young too. I mean, we were kids. So, um, so it's been a healing journey. Yes, together, kind of separate, but together. And it's still in progress. But even last year, just having that face-to-face talk and crying together, and, really talking about some things that we just hadn't in a while. We did a lot of those emails a while ago. So, yeah, it's still a long process, but it's working.
But it's working.
Mm.
Yeah, and I will tell people that your story is not always like somebody else's
Right.
story. Your story is an individual story, and it's working for you. It's
Mhm.
working in your favor because you're healing. You're able to get through this, and sometimes you
Yeah.
never get that confirmation that this really did happen. People don't admit,
Right.
and so that's a difficult process too. You have some comments that I wanted to share. Kathy said, "My mom was not supportive at all. Brother said he was sorry and said he was ashamed, but did nothing to atone for the rapes." Kathy, thank
Mhm.
you for sharing and deciding to share on this platform. And it's really hard, and hopefully you're still on a healing journey. You have anything to say to Kathy Maria?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard. It really is. And uh, I've heard a lot of people say you can't rely on what they say or do. We have to kind of move forward no matter what. Because I didn't know if even there was a point where people were saying you should go meet him face to face, go where he is, and I just couldn't. I didn't feel right doing that, and it didn't feel right. And I was, but then I thought maybe I have to do that. Maybe that's what's going to make me feel better. But I got to the point where no, I have to work on myself and do the best I can to not have to rely on something external. Um, it's hard. It's just hard, but we just, and it's baby steps, and sometimes, but that's all I can
It's an
say.
internal because people from the outside will sometimes make it worse.
Yeah,
That's what I've like. I've
yeah,
had people say things to me like, "Well, why do you always tell your business? Why do you always
right.
share?"
Oh yeah, I get that too.
Like, shut up!
Yeah, yeah,
Why would you say something so mean? But I don't even think that they realize that
right.
they're saying something so mean. Or some people are intentional, but some people truly don't
Don't
realize what
know.
they're saying.
I
It's
know. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
internal.
Just recently, somebody said to me, "Well, it was no big deal because it was a one-time thing. It wasn't, repeated or anything, and it wasn't violent. I wasn't threatened. It was, just really a touch." And so somebody just said, "It was no big deal. Get over it." That thing, and that just hurts. And you just gotta ignore it and move on, and not, just do your own healing. And yeah, you're right. So sometimes it's worse to get feedback you don't want, but that's a reality too. So I guess we have to just work with that.
It is. It is a reality, and I try to talk about it so that people stop doing it.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's
Exactly.
annoying. Like, stop hurting people.
Yeah.
Afia said most abusers have been previously abused. I will tell you statistically that most abusers haven't. We're trying to combat that myth. A lot of abusers have, but people will use that as an excuse, right? That's what I don't like. People will say, well, they were abused as a child, and that's why they did it. Not everybody. Some people just want power and control and will do it and
Mhm.
have not been abused. So it just depends, right?
Yeah.
How for you, Maria? How do you feel about when people say that most abusers have been previously abused?
Just from what I've learned recently, like I always thought that too, and that was the situation in my case, so it made sense, and it did make me feel better when I found that out. That it made it. There was a reason that it
Mm.
wasn't out. He wasn't out to maliciously hurt me. I felt like it was his trauma was being transferred, but now I've and even I've done a lot more research or read a little bit more about sibling sexual abuse and sibling sexual trauma, and it's not the predominant. I thought it would be, but like you said, some people are just, it's a power thing. Pornography now these days is up there and one of the top
The
reasons. So there's different reasons, and but for me it felt kind of good to know that was something behind it.
Afia said, same here, speaking from
Mhm.
previous experiences. So thank you, Afia, for even sharing that. And that we do see that that is a very common experience for so many. And I applaud you for even pushing through and for sharing that with us today. And you just never know, right? You just never know what
Mhm.
people go through. And that's why I'm so big on talking to our kids and
Mhm.
our parents. You know, the parents need to know, and sibling abuse is real. Like this happens, and cousins and family. G Honey said he probably was glad that you called him to ease his mind. Maybe if
Yeah, I think ultimately, yes. At first, it was a shock, and he said he was gonna go to his grave with it, like, with his abuse, so I think it all brought that up for him, but I think it finally did. It did ease his mind, and it helped him start to heal, um, on his own as well, yeah.
we got our own healing journeys. Angela said the best choice you can make is one that improve your inner structure mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Mhm.
Indeed, indeed. And it's not somebody from the outside.
Right,
It's the inner work that we have to do. So
right.
thank you for that. Right.
Mhm.
Were there some clues, right? Were there some past clues that maybe this was going on for you? Because I think that's helpful for parents to hear from you, and maybe somebody that's been abused as well as a child.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again, like you said, everyone's different, and everyone's situation is different. And mine wasn't long-term abuse or anything like that. So I think it would be really hard to have. I've thought about this a lot, like how could somebody have seen this? And before I was 42 and figured it out myself. Um, but that me asking my mom to sleep with her.
Yeah.
Is that was out of the ordinary. My mother's a psychologist. She even worked with families of incest. So, she didn't she when I told her, she just kept saying, "I never saw any clues," and she knew to look for them. So, it is hard. So I know there's a lot of other cases where it's, um, change in behavior and grades go down and all this stuff. That didn't happen for me. I was always a good kid. I mean, you don't want to say every good kid. You're going to say, "Oh, are you being abused?" Um, but you just look out for, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know in my case, but the clues that now in retrospect I look back at are more after I was a little older, and there were things that when I was working, and I don't know if this is answering your question, but just somebody at my work was coming on to me basically, and it was somebody up here who I considered someone like a brother. I really thought of him like a brother, and I sort of just freaked out. And at the time, I didn't know why I was so angry at this person and really like yelling at this person, and it was not my character. And I thought, this is so odd. And now, once I remembered, that was, I was in my 20s probably, but now I can see that was out of character. So if there's something that seems out of character, there's for me now I can look back and say, wow, okay, that makes sense now. Why I reacted that way. Even things like, oh, I didn't tell my mother I got my period. I couldn't tell her. I don't know. Like I remember trying month after month to tell her, but it's like something was keeping me from doing it, and it was bizarre. I remember thinking at the time, like, "This is weird. Why can't I tell her?" And I just kept thinking, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal." I kept saying to myself, which funny, that's what I would say when I remembered about the abuse, or the being molested, that it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's no big deal is what kept running through my head. So, just odd things like that, because the psychologist thought that was interesting that I didn't tell her
Yeah.
about my period.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was that. There were a few others that again were more after the fact. Even just like again, there's such minor things. I don't know that this would be any helpful clues, but we were get, my husband got somebody to come landscape our yard, and they put like this curb. I don't know. It was just something I didn't want, and I had this crazy reaction to it. Like I thought it was ruining the landscape, and and I remember thinking, why am I getting so mad about this? But just I guess over sort of overreactions to things in general, maybe is just something to kind of be aware of and think that why. And when kids, I mean, just in general, when kids act out, we're always trying to just calm them down or give them some
Your
medication or
behavior
something.
looks good.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Parents need
kids
to
are
know
not.
that.
Yeah,
Parents need to know that sometimes there are no signs. That does
right,
not mean that your
right,
children are not being abused.
right, right. So, which is, but get to prevention. Like if we understand this is out there, if we can get on the preventative side of things and not just have to look for them after the kid has already
Right.
been abused, then we're we're much better off. So yeah. So again, talking like you said, talking about it and making everyone aware of it. And on the other side of the, what's motivating, even in the case of sibling abuse, what's like the pornography and um, they've been abused too, but just other things that, and even that's the structure of the family. Like some may have more power, some siblings may have more power than others. Kind of just in the way it goes. So I don't know, and the way somebody might believe one child over the other, and one kid ends up being the kind of scapegoat a lot because everybody just, oh, they're the kid who always is doing something wrong. Well, a lot of times they're doing something wrong because they're acting out.
Right.
Um, so
To pay attention
it's
to that.
complicated. Yeah, it's complicated.
For you, after you've done all your research, because I know you did a lot of research, and we looked at repressed memories, they're called all different types of things, right? I
Yeah,
call mine suppressed. And they're like, it's not suppressed. Well, I feel like I suppressed it.
yeah.
It's not repressed. And then what is it for you based on your research? What were you diagnosed with based on what you
Well, yeah, I wasn't diagnosed with anything because I wasn't. This all came up when I was getting physical therapy, getting that myofascial
know?
release physical therapy. I didn't have any psychological problems, so I didn't go to a psychologist or anything. So um, when I remembered, I just, I knew the term repressed memory. That's what I had. So I had forgotten it and I remembered whatever. So to me, it was a repressed memory. But I did start going to see psychologists after I remembered. And, nobody ever, I didn't ask and nobody ever told me, you know, this is what your diagnosis is. We just worked on the fact that I had this memory. So I never had an official diagnosis that I know of. But like you said, as I was just researching it for my own interest, now the current psychological term in the DSM, in the psychological diagnostic book, is dissociative amnesia. So I kind of like that term because the reason I don't like repressed memory so much is when I looked that up on Wikipedia, what came up is all this stuff about the false memory syndrome and how it's so controversial. And first, I called some people. I was like, "How can we change this? Because this is just it's real. Repressed memories, or whatever you want to call them, dissociative amnesia. It's real. It happened to me. It happened to now. I know so many people, and I've looked at the research. Like you said, 30-40% of people, victims of trauma repress their memories or have dissociative amnesia. So I do like that term because it talks about dissociation, and that's just a common. This way, people can maybe understand it better because that's a common thing we do. We space out when we're doing something, right? Sometimes you drive long distance. You're like, oh, how did I get here? That's dissociation. So it's that's sort of the simple term, and I think 75%. They say 75% of people just may have a dissociative episode like that. But when it's dissociative amnesia, when you actually have a forgotten part or a whole memory gone, it's just an extreme of that, and it's because of trauma. It's in most cases when it's trauma or something highly stressful. So that I feel like maybe that term will help us understand it, and that it is just a natural progression of something more traumatic or more stressful happening. Um, but repressed memory, I think I had a whole list. There's delayed recall. There's a bunch of different terms that are used. And I remember my psychologist saying something like, she said, "Oh, they don't call it repressed memory anymore," or something. I said, "Well, I said for me, I feel like it was. I feel like it was. I was actively pushing it down without knowing. So I felt like it was so deep in me that whatever repressed even really means, and suppressed, whatever that, whatever the difference is. But I felt like it was something that had to be actively pushed subconsciously, though, because I didn't know it. But
You didn't know
it
it.
just felt like it was so deep and so pushed away that it, to me, repressed was the word that made sense to me.
That makes sense.
But again, it's
I think it's important to identify your trauma yourself. So if
mhm,
you want to call yourself a victim, you use the word victim. You want to say survivor, survivor. Sometimes I say champion.
right,
If you want to say repressed, if you want to say amnesia, dissociative amnesia, is your story. Own it. Own what you want to say. For me, it was very difficult because I didn't understand how our brains work. So I was like, how
right,
could I forget? Like I just was so mad at myself
right,
for forgetting. And so I started doing my own research. And over years, I've started learning more and more and more. And so I have something that's called dissociative identity disorder, and they'll call it DID. And I literally will be operating in like different aspects of my life. And even in my book, I shared that. There was Vanessa, there was Dr. Vanessa, and then there was Latrice. And I would have
mhm,
like these different act outs. And my mind just was real crazy. I thank God that I'm operating as Vanessa now, but I would have like these gaps and memory lapse, and it was really hard, but it was real. It doesn't mean that what happened to me is not real. It just was hard to try to put it together and to remember. I still don't even remember my rapist's real name. I call him Staff Sergeant Infantryman because I don't remember, and but that's what and I think it's also a way for me not to remember because I don't know if I had would have went after him, right?
right, right,
Like after the years, it was 17 years for me. So
right,
would I have gone after him? I don't know. And so I was
right,
like, God, are you trying to protect me? And
yeah,
I want people to know about the limbic system.
mhm,
So when I went to like a sexual assault retreat, and I had to do that as well, uh, go to get some help. We talked about the limbic system, and that is the part of your brain that protects you. So if any type of trauma like raises your blood pressure, your heart rate, causes anxiety, your brain protects you and it forgets. It's like pushes all of this away. And there's research to show how our brain will suppress certain memories. Like if you go to war, you don't remember what all happened on the battlefield. Or if you have a car accident, you can't remember everything from the initial impact because your brain is protecting you. And I think it's important for people to understand that and know that this is truly real.
right. It's just a normal. It's your brain, like you said, your brain protecting you. It's a defense mechanism, and it's normal. I mean, it doesn't happen to everybody, but it's a process that our bodies have learned over, evolved to be able to do to protect us. If there's something so scary and so life threatening, even if it's in our minds life threatening, we have to shut that down so we can survive, continue to survive. And again, once we're ready, because it's always in there, it's always in there. And once we're ready, we can then address it. And when we're
Address.
strong enough, I
Yep.
think, like you said, I think your memory is held aside for a reason.
For a reason. Yeah, I don't even stress about it anymore.
Yeah.
I just keep it moving. But it used to frustrate me that I couldn't get everything. And so I was like, oh,
Right.
maybe you don't need to know, Vanessa. Maybe
Right.
I just needed to know to understand what was going on with me because I was a real bad alcoholic. And
Right.
so my trauma showed up in my life. And
Right.
I didn't know why, or I didn't know why I was depressed. Right? I was like, I'm just depressed, and I don't know why. I was
Right.
suicidal. I didn't know why. So I
Right.
think my memories came back to help me understand what I was going through, and actually be able to help other people.
Right.
So
Right.
it's kind of weird how our
Yeah.
brains operate.
Well, yeah, I think my brain. I mean, ruptured the disc in my neck. I mean, that sounds so strange, but like everything got to a pressure point where that popped, and that was my brain saying, "All right, it's time to face this." And it still took 2 years. It took physical pain for me to stop and change my life. And then, then I was ready for that memory. I think once I, kind of stopped everything and made myself focus on this. And like you said, now I can talk about it, and now maybe that's what I had to do, to get to this point.
To get to
Um,
that point.
yeah,
It's interesting.
mm,
I think it's
mm,
important, and I know it's not just us, and so that's why I wanted us to really talk about it
yeah,
and to
yeah.
talk about that part of your trauma. Has people ever asked you how could you possibly forget?
You know, again, I've been lucky. I haven't had people say that. I have had um, somebody say, "Are you sure?" When I told them. Um, I've heard a lot of people say that, but not directly to me. I've just heard that around, and you think it yourself because you hear that around. When I remembered, how could I possibly forget? I said to myself probably a million times when
Mhm.
I first remembered. So again, luckily nobody said that to me, but still, when somebody said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Well, what?"
Mhm.
Yes. um, and like you said, it's our limbic system, it's our brains, it's our reaction to trauma. It's a normal reaction. And talk to any trauma therapist or trauma specialist, they know. And clinical psychologists who see people with this, they know. And why it's questioned. I mean, it's questioned, I guess, in defenses for loss, in the legal system, but it's real, and it just really does happen. And even the statistics that show how many people with trauma um, do forget and dissociate and have the amnesia. It's just a fact of life, uh, and the sooner, I think the sooner. One of the things that might reduce it. I don't know. I'm not a specialist in this area, but just early recognition of what happened. Like if I had told somebody that heard me, that's when it's less likely if there. That is, the research does show that it's less likely if you're talking about it more at the beginning, instead of it being after a long time and kind of sitting there and being suppressed. Yeah.
And that's why I always say that people have an option to decide to hush no more,
Right.
because that starts the healing process when you tell one person.
Right.
And I always say pick the person that you choose wisely because it's
Right.
not
Right.
always the easiest thing
Right.
to do. But when you start talking about it, you start taking control of your life and you start healing and working on it and going through the journey. And so you're right. The longer that you don't tell anybody, the more likely you will repress the memory.
Yeah. And
And
then,
so
and when I did remember, it was still so hard for me. Like I had my mother read what I wrote, and I was slowly telling people, but very slowly, and it was very scary. But so I was writing. I just felt compelled to write after I remembered. So for me, it was just I was getting it out, even though I couldn't tell anybody, so, or I wasn't comfortable yet telling too many people. That that was such an important process for me, and it took 12 years before I published my book. It was literally that long that I was still processing and writing and afraid to share the story because what would it do to my family? All these fears that came along with it. But each time I wrote a little more and said a little more, I could tell a few more people, so it just became more comfortable because it has sat
yeah.
there for a long time.
Althea said, "Thank you for sharing your story."
Yeah.
She's thanking
You're
you for
welcome.
sharing because it's not easy. It's not easy for us to share. And your book, was your book a good healing journey for you? Was that a tool that you used to kind of get your story out for
Um,
you?
yeah, I didn't recognize it to be a tool. It was, like I said, a compulsion. When
Okay.
I would just I literally my neck was still hurting. I would have to lie down to rest my neck and not feel so much pain. But I'd be lying there, my heart would start pounding, and I was like, I got to get up and write. That was just I was like I said, it was some force that I didn't know what. So I didn't even know necessarily why I was writing it, but I kept telling myself, maybe I can share this, maybe I can help other people. But really, I was in the process of helping myself at the time. So it was more in retrospect when I finished it, and I really felt like, wow, I did all this. I should share it because maybe it will, if it helps one person, and
Absolutely.
it's worth it. And but I see how important it was for me to understand the story because, again, when you remember, I didn't know who I was anymore. It was like, who is this person that didn't know what had happened to her? It made no sense to me. So then, kind of coming to those clues and seeing these things that started to make sense. Even like startle response is a trauma survivors often have a high startle response, and so I just started to read more about these things and understand that, wow, that I do that too, and I do that too, and putting it into a story made sense to me, and that was important.
Yeah, I didn't want to share my story. I didn't want to write, but my coach. Her name is Angela Carr Patterson. She was like, "You got to share your story. You tell everybody else to hush no more." And I was like, "What?" She said, "You got to share it." So it was very difficult for me to write it. I was fighting it, but I had a counselor that walked through the process with me. But I didn't want to write it, and now
Wow.
I'm glad that I did. You know,
Right.
it's a really good tool for me for healing. Just be like, you know what it is what it is. And then I am the storyteller. I created the narrative, so I could share the story how I want to share the
Right.
story and take
Right.
control over it. So I'm glad I did, but
Right.
I didn't have a compulsion. I was fighting it.
Interesting. I mean,
I was,
I ended up having probably 1,000 pages um, of stuff to write. So it took 12 years because I had to pare it down to something that was, more digestible. Because every session I'd have, whether it was a talk therapist or the myofascial release, something crazy seemed to happen, and some connection I made or some emotions I was having. So I would just go home and write it down because it was so fascinating to me what my body and brain was doing. And yeah, and I didn't, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing um, for a
but you
healing
did.
way, but it
You did
worked.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Afia said, as you said, hush no more. I had just finished typing it. I love to be a guest and share my story. Thanks so much for this. I will send you the information, Afia. Anybody could be a guest by just going to hushnomore.org/podcast and complete the application. And I will definitely send it to you in your inbox. So thank you. And she also says she's a believer in counseling and therapy. And I am too. Sometimes we just need that safe space to be
Right.
able to talk. And when I was writing my story, I needed somebody, just to be honest.
Yeah.
Can you share the name of your book, Maria, and how people can purchase it?
Oh, sure. It's called The Invisible Key: Unlocking the Mystery of My Chronic Pain, and it's available on Amazon and actually, I think BarnesandNoble.com and Walmart.com and some libraries too. You can ask your librarian on Long Island. I have them in some of the libraries, but and there is a um, through ebooks ebooks in libraries. There's a program called Indie, like for indie authors, but it's Indie New York, that I got my ebook in through more libraries too. So you can try to look for it there too.
I love that. I love that. And it's on your website too. So
Yeah, on my website. Yeah.
healingfromchronicpain.com. I think that's important that people can look at maybe your story is something that's similar to them because like I have a lot of pain, but I know my pain is from the army. Like I know. Right? I don't think it was necessarily from trauma. But some people are in a lot of pain and they don't know why. Like, the test results do not show anything.
Right.
And so the possibility is that. Have people come and talk to you about just their pain?
Oh yeah, that comes up so often because and it's interesting because I came from this originally not knowing that I was a survivor of any sexual trauma, but I was just dealing with debilitating chronic pain. So I knew so many people with that, but then once I made the connection for me with the trauma, and then I started to get kind of over into this world, so many people are saying, "Well, I have chronic pain too," and they don't make that connection either. And like you said, when a doctor or a healthcare provider tells them there's, no known cause and no known cure, that's when I say, well, look to other things, emotional burdens and trauma, because for me, that's what lifted my pain dramatically. I mean, I still deal with it, but it's so much reduced than it was that I can function now when I couldn't before. But yeah,
I'm thankful for you, definitely, because it's not easy. It's not easy to come on a podcast and share your story, but it's not easy to write the book, to share with your family. So you are definitely a champion and have overcame a lot. And I honor you in this moment for just being able to show people that it's possible to hush no more and heal. And it's a healing journey. Like it's
yeah.
not something that happens very fast. It's a
Right.
lifetime, really.
It's yeah, like the myofascial therapists always said to me, healing isn't, it's not an event. It's no, see, now I got it wrong. It's a I forgot. It's a journey, not an event. But that's not what they said. Sorry, I'll
Something
think of it
similar.
later. But
Okay.
the point is what you said. Yeah, and this did take me years to get to where I am. So and a lot of therapy, and even at the time, I didn't even think that talk therapy was as effective as the myofascial work for me, because my body, I was so shut down that things had to come up through my body
Right.
without me having to think about it. But now in retrospect, I know how important the talk therapy was as well, because I was doing both, and so many things came to my understanding through that, through the talk therapy, that helped me kind of put the pieces together and make sense of my whole story. So all of it has helped me. And unfortunately, some people can't. Well, you said you offer it, so that's great, because it's hard to find sometimes for people. But there's a lot of other things to do, you know,
Mhm.
just to take care of ourselves, sort of self-care stuff, and even like the writing or the whatever, exercising, moving around a little bit. Just there's a lot of things that we can do to take care of ourselves that will help, um, even with the pain and the trauma healing.
And it's possible. Before we close out, is there anything else that you want to share or say before we leave?
Um, I guess when it comes to recovered memories, repressed memories, whatever we want to call them, dissociative amnesia, just believe us. And, you know, why would we make it up, right? So, why, if we've already gone through a trauma and it was severe enough to make us forget, to have our brains be kind enough to us to put it away, and if we're going to divulge that and share that, be kind and supportive. And yeah, just believe us.
I love that. I always say that this journey is not easy to tell somebody. It's very embarrassing. You have to go through the shame, and your family don't believe you. People mistreat you, talk about you. It's not something that you would just lie about.
Right,
And so
right,
now, do
right,
people? And I always bring it up. Do people tell stories? Yes, they do. Between 1 to 3%, and normally have a reason why, right? And so I talk about that. But most people are not lying. Your children, I'd rather believe my child and do an investigation than not.
right,
So believe your children, and then let the abuser prove that it didn't happen. Don't make
right,
your children believe that it prove that it did. I
right.
think it's very important. The
Yeah,
abuser should be the one that has to defend themselves, and not our children, or not the survivor. And I think that our society has that backwards
hmm,
in a way.
I agree.
And
I
so
agree. Yeah,
believe. And it's
yeah.
not easy. And it doesn't matter how many years have passed by.
Right, right.
Doesn't matter. Yours was 30. That is a long
32,
time.
32 years.
30, yeah, that's
Yeah,
a long time.
yeah, yeah.
To have a repressed memory, or to have dissociative amnesia. It's a long time. And
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
right,
And thankfully you have your brother to collaborate that with you.
right,
That is important.
right.
So
Yeah, yeah. In fact, there's, I think, one of the things I read that about the same amount of people who had a repressed memory or not have corroboration. So it's not any different. So it's, in both cases, it's,
mhm,
you know,
I like that.
people do, it happens.
How can people get in contact with you?
I'm on all the social media, I guess most of social media, Facebook and Twitter, whatever, Instagram, everything but TikTok. I haven't ventured into TikTok. I'm old, so. And my website is healingfromchronicpain.com, and there's more information about the connection between trauma and pain, and just my journey, and what myofascial pain is, because that's what I ended up having, being diagnosed with that, and that's common. Just it's a tightening of the muscles and making knots in your muscles that can because of stress, chronic stress like this. But yeah, so the website and social media, I guess.
Would you like for people to email you if they have any
Yeah,
questions?
email is fine. I've got the healing from chronic pain at gmail.com. And on my website, there's a contact page where you can, I'll get emails through that way too, if you want to do it through the website.
Thank you. I think people have questions sometimes, especially when they have unexplainable pain, or just to
Yeah,
have somebody else to talk to,
yeah,
just to share it. So I thank you for that, and just being available. And feel free to go in on the page and make any comments that you want. Share your website, or, just what all you would like for people to know.
okay.
And I think that's important for us to do that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you. And
thank you.
all right, so you have heard from the amazing, amazing Maria Socolof. She is just phenomenal, and I'm so proud of her from sharing her story. And I heard her story in the Sexual Assault Advocacy Network group. And I was like, wow, I got to get her on the
Mhm.
podcast. So I'm glad that she's part of it. And she's also going to be part of the Hush No More poetry book that will be released this month for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So I'm excited about that. And I look forward to even spotlighting her as part of the Hush No More community because it's important. All right, so this month is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we have a lot of events. We had an amazing CWP class last week because it's important that you protect yourself no matter what. If you want to use a weapon, if you want to learn self defense, if you, whatever it is that you want to use, we believe that you should be able to protect yourself legally and know how. So we did that last week. This Saturday, 9 April, we are going to have a 5K. We are going to be running to decide to hush no more against sexual abuse, no matter if it's a child or an adult. And then on Sunday, 10 April, we are going to do our Hush No More documentary screening, where we're going to share the stories of survivors and their healing journey and then have a discussion afterwards. You are welcome to join us. And then on April 30th, we are having an amazing event in Columbus, South Carolina called Stomp Out Crime, where we will be at Benedict College football stadium. And we're going to have so many resources. Richland County Sheriff Department will be there, City of Columbia Police Department, different resources, all different organizations. We're going to have free food, free clothes. Brand new clothes are being donated by Versona and Cato. So I'm so excited about that. And it's just going to be a great community event. And the first 1,000 people will get a free personal safety alarm at that event as well. So come on out, bring your friends, get some free food. COVID testing will be available. It's going to be a really fun day, and we'll have music and just fun. So come out. All of our events, you can find them on Facebook on the events. You can find them on hushnomore.org and register. And come on out and just show some love and kindness. And so we can show some love and kindness to you because I believe that love and kindness is how we prevent crime, right? When you love on somebody. If you love, then you would never harm somebody. So that is my goal, to eliminate crime through love and kindness, for us to just talk in our community. So you're always welcome. And we have released the October Domestic Violence Awareness Month link. So go to our website, sign up for our domestic violence walk. It's going to be October 15th, and it is going to be the bomb this year. We are going to be talking about how do you heal naturally when you're going through domestic violence. And so it's going to be at the Riverfront Park in Columbus, South Carolina. So it's going to be all about water, natural healing, and showing love and kindness at that event as well. So I would love for you all to sign up October 15th, and you can walk with us virtually in your own community. You don't have to come to Columbia. You can hush no more in whatever city and state that you live in. We would love for you to join us on October 15th. So that's all that we have. Thank you once again, Maria. Know that I am definitely honored to be associated with somebody else that is weird, that has a repressed memories, amnesia, all kind of. It makes you feel good as somebody else going through some stuff kind of similar to you, that you're not alone. So
Yep, for sure.
it's weird to say that, but it's comforting when I
Yeah,
can hear somebody else's story, like, oh, she forgot too, or he forgot also.
yeah,
So we're not
yeah.
alone.
No.
People can reach out at any time to hushnomore.org, social media, or even to call us at 1-888-285-2161. Peace and blessings to you all. Thank you so very much.